Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second real council meeting in person this year. It's great to see people in the audience. I want to welcome all of our staff and our council, all accounted for. Well, I'm sure Paul Vickers will be joining us very shortly, so we do have quorum. And a special welcome to our guests and to those who have joined us here live today and those who are watching from home, either on Rogers TV or through our live streaming on YouTube. So with that, welcome everyone. I will ask you to join me in a moment of reflection as we consider the agenda for today. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? Seeing none, know that you can so declare at any time during the proceedings if necessary. Next on the agenda are announcements. Does anyone on council have an announcement they wish to make at this time? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I just wanted to acknowledge that Grey County, the Economic Development Department, has just released their third regional business survey. And this study is important that businesses take the time to go onto the county website, or there will be a link in our Meaford Chamber of Commerce chamber chat tomorrow to fill out the questionnaire, because this data really helps the county in terms of looking at support for their current initiatives or perhaps introducing new ones as businesses continue to struggle with COVID and get into the winter season. So that's it for me, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything further? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think it's too soon for me to just to start to mention about Remembrance Day. Our president at the Legion will be putting something to the local newspaper, and just for folks with COVID, everything is absolutely diminished. You will not see any Canadian Forces personnel. You will not see any marching bands. There will be no cadets of any type, Army, Navy, or Air, or Junior Rangers. And to cut down on people being close to people, all of the wreaths will be pre-placed, and there will be further information coming. And like I say, the president is going to send something off for you folks to read, but it is going to be much diminished. And actually, Dominion Command in Ottawa has actually suggested that we say to discourage people from coming. And at a time when it's the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, but the safety of people, it's talked about all the time. And so that day is no different than anything else that other clubs and other organizations are facing. It's different. But there will be someone there at 11 o'clock to pay respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. And another disappointment in this year of change we have that will be sadly missed. It's always a wonderful time of remembrance and reflection, and well attended. And thanks to the Legion, our Legion, for orchestrating that. Our hearts and thoughts will be with all of our veterans and our service people, men and women in uniform, on that special day. So thank you for that. We'll keep it all posted. And Councillor Vickers, you have a...
Thank you, Your Worship. It's not an inquiry, but Tony, I heard on the radio there last week that they were selling face masks with poppies on them. But I wondered if it was sanctioned by the Legion or whether this was somebody else just doing their own thing. And because I know the Legion is very protective of the poppy, and they well should be. And I just wondered if you knew anything about these face masks with the poppy on the front of them.
Well, thank you for that question, Councillor Vickers. You're right, the poppy is copyrighted, and it is enforceable in Canada. We don't know whether some of those have been produced outside of Canada. We have no authority to challenge that. But, you know, if people are thinking of supporting in some way, it's always wise for them to check whether it's someone trying to, let's face it, capitalize on something like that, or whether it is truly sanctioned. But at this point, I have no internal knowledge of us producing a face mask. But then again, I'm only one person, so I definitely could be out of the loop.
Yeah, and I didn't want to sponsor it if the Legion wasn't in full agreement with it. So that was why you're one of the few people I know of the Legion, so I thought I would ask.
Thanks for that. So seeing nothing further, we will move on to public participation and welcome all members of the public. We do encourage members of our public to provide council with their comments and their questions at this time of the council meeting. Just a few housekeeping rules. Presentations must be prearranged and with the clerk's department and before the agenda is released, so that any documentation or notice of this presentation can be included on the agenda. But members of the public who wish to make a deputation about a specific agenda item or ask a general question is asked to check in with the clerk's office at the start of the meeting. So with that, we will welcome our first presenters. Bill Cameron, can you come forward to the microphone and welcome.
Thank you. Too loud? Not loud enough.
I think you're fine.
It's okay. All right. Meaford taxes are nearly the highest in all of Grey County, but when we were informed last spring our taxes were increasing another 3%, my displeasure with irresponsible spending, lack of productivity among employees, and the severe, yeah, I said severe, overstaffing became important enough to speak up rather than just whine to myself. I can't be the only person who was horrified at last year's budget debacle, where senior staff were given spending parameters for their budgets, which they promptly ignored. After a few days of grumbling, council passed the budget anyway, showing staff they can spend whatever they want without question, showing taxpayers the majority of councillors obviously have no financial grip on reality, and our tax dollars are a bottomless piggy bank.
Excuse me, Mr. Cameron. We will accept your questions if they're directed, please, and your comments, but please refrain from any negative commentary about staff or the policies that were there and this council has approved. So please continue if you can without any diminishment of either our staff or any members of council.
Well, unfortunately, in this case, reality is going to include quite a bit of diminishment of staff.
Then
You've got a lot of over-management that, quite frankly, aren't managing.
Mr. Cameron, there is no opportunity for that to be refuted and for that to be substantiated, so comments like that are out of order.
Gotcha. Thank you for your time.
Okay, our second presenters for this afternoon are John Mikkelsen and Clark Little with an update on TC Energy Pump Storage Project. So welcome to you. So, Mr. Mikkelsen, I guess you're on your own.
Yes. Thank you. Your Worship, members of council, on behalf of TC Energy, thank you for the opportunity to address your council this afternoon. I hope you and your families have stayed safe and healthy through this pandemic. I'd like to commend the efforts of municipal officials and staff in Meaford who have continued to deliver essential services during this challenging time. It's nice to be with you here today in person. We appreciate the opportunity to brief you on our proposed pump storage project, and I look forward to answering your questions that you may have after my update. Since we announced our intention to study the feasibility of developing a pump storage project here at the Meaford Tank Range, there's been much discussion in this community. From our perspective, this discussion is a constructive and essential component of the project development. It's raised awareness of the project. It's also raised important concerns which need to be addressed. I assure you, we are listening and we are taking these concerns very seriously. At our deputation in June, our local representative, Clark Little, explained that as a result of the input that we received to date, we made changes to both the development plan and the design of the facility itself. We are grateful to the citizens of Meaford for their active involvement and this valuable input. Over the past year, we've continued to advance the development of the proposed project by incorporating findings from our engineering studies, further exploring the environmental constraints, and incorporating input from the engagement with the community. And as a result, the design of the project has evolved considerably. The current proposed configuration, in our view, better protects the environment, reduces noise and visual impacts for residents. Let me briefly explain the three key changes. First, we will build the powerhouse deep underground. It will not be visible from the shoreline, and noise from the pumps and turbines and other equipment will be substantially eliminated. Second, the inlet-outlet will be located offshore in deep water, where there's expected to be less sensitive fish habitat and fewer fish present. The inlet-outlet will be accessed via tunnels installed beneath the lake bed, avoiding impacts to the shoreline, the lake bed, and preserving sensitive nearshore fish habitat. The inlet-outlet structures will be raised off the lake bed and incorporate fixed screens. This design reduces the speed of the water withdrawn and released, reducing the potential to create turbidity, maintaining water clarity, and further protecting any fish that may be present. The results: no shoreline or nearshore structures, no visible structures in the water, protection of fish and fish habitat, and maintenance of water clarity. Third, we are committed to advancing a transmission connection underwater from the project site to a location near Wasaga Beach, and from underground from there to the Stainer Transformer Station. We heard from the community that this connection option is preferred to overhead transmission on land. While all these changes show promise, they need further study to confirm their feasibility. We are still in the early stages of studying this important project, and the project will continue to evolve as this work is completed. We will continue to listen and incorporate input we receive in both our design and our ongoing communication. We are effectively designing this project in the public eye. I'm optimistic that as we continue to respond with solutions to the concerns raised, we will earn the trust of the community and demonstrate that we genuinely care about the concerns that the community has. In the next few months, the Department of National Defense will complete its analysis of potential impacts on military operations and training on the base. This includes considerations related to security, Indigenous and treaty rights, property management, the environment, potential public policy benefits, and species at risk. Should the Department of National Defense decide that we can move forward to the environmental impact assessment, other federal departments and agencies will become involved. And to name a few, the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, Environment, Climate Change Canada, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada. In addition, the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and other relevant government or provincial government agencies will also be involved in this next stage. I'd like to provide you with a little background on the governance of these processes. The Impact Assessment Agency of Canada is a federal body which serves Canadians by looking at both positive and negative environmental, economic, social, and health impacts of potential projects. The Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has a similar responsibility provincially. The impact assessment is conducted by independent experts to identify both potential negative impacts and potential benefits from proposed projects, as well as to find the mitigation measures needed to address impacts. Both levels of government review the impact assessment to make separate decisions on whether proposed projects are in the public interest. The community will continue to have a say throughout this process. In fact, public consultation has been mandated in the federal process and is a key component in the provincial one. All documents, those submitted to the agencies by TC Energy and those created by the agencies that are related to the project, will be posted for public review and comment. And most importantly, TC Energy will be required to show to the satisfaction of the regulators that we have addressed stakeholders' comments and concerns in our project submissions. While we wait for a decision from the Department of National Defense this year, we are taking advantage of the fall conditions to continue to advance our field studies. Right now, we are conducting aquatic studies to gather location-specific data on the baseline condition of Georgian Bay near the proposed project. Through these studies, we will be learning about current aquatic environment and gathering information on fish types, populations, and habits, fish habitat, and water quality. This is preliminary field work to inform ongoing design and will feed into the environmental impact assessment processes should the project advance to that phase. The information collected through these activities will provide us with a benchmark and help us in the project planning process. Ensuring we protect Georgian Bay as we develop this project is a priority, and these studies are one of the first steps toward meeting that commitment. Beyond the environmental concerns, there are a number of issues broadly classified as social economic that by their nature are complex and require a collaborative community-based approach. We need to clearly define issues and work toward mutually acceptable and beneficial solutions. We believe that a more focused and formal communication forum would vastly improve the information flow and create more effective discussion on issues. A collaborative process designed to continuously engage, develop solutions, and inform the public could be accomplished through the formation of a community liaison committee. This could be made up of members of residential community, the local business community, local governments, and other interest groups such as labor, education, and health services, to name a few. The Community Liaison Committee would act as the focal point for the development of plans and activities designed to ensure that no constituent or interest group gets left behind, and that there's sufficient lead time for Meaford to position itself to respond to the job opportunities and the spending that will accompany near-term and future phases of the project. Additionally, solutions identified by the committee could lay the foundation for a formal long-term host community with the municipality. We would expect that the host community agreement with Meaford would be similar to what we have in other communities where we have facilities. The agreement would encompass our commitments to employment and economic benefits, community investment, environmental protection, and a cost recovery mechanism that leaves Meaford whole. In the coming weeks, we would like to advance conversations on the implementation of these initiatives. COVID-19 is expected to create challenging economic times over the next few years, not just in this province, but across this country. If the environmental impact assessment process is determined that this project is environmentally feasible and in the best interest of the public, the project would offer significant economic and employment benefits at a much needed time. Over the anticipated 4-year construction period, the project would employ over 1,000 people and inject more than $750 million directly into the region and create significant indirect and induced employment and economic activity. Further, this project is one of the largest climate change initiatives being developed in Canada at the moment. It would assist Canada in meeting its 2030 and 2050 climate change objectives. It would be state-of-the-art design incorporating the best technologies designed and built by Ontarians to produce an environmentally responsible energy solution for Ontario's future. We look forward to continuing these discussions over the coming years. We think this project offers long-term value and opportunities for the community while protecting its beauty, pristine environment, and quality of life. I want to thank you for your time today, and I look forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mikkelsen. A very thorough encapsulation of your project to date. We appreciate your time this afternoon, we're here. Any questions from Council? And Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, John. I appreciate your report. I'm a bit confused about the job numbers. They seem to keep jumping around. We originally heard about 800 jobs, then it jumped up to maybe 10 or 1,100 jobs. In our written report, we have approximately 620 jobs created, and I believe you just said there could be 1,000 jobs. I know it's early yet in the game, but can you narrow that down a little bit from 600 to 1,100? That seems like pretty wide open territory.
Yeah, so first of all, I would refer you to the study that we did, the local or the regional impact assessment study that we completed recently, where they actually have a profile of the jobs that would be anticipated to be created through the construction period. I think one of the issues here is that the workforce is going to fluctuate over the 4 years. So the 1,000 person number that I quoted earlier really reflects the peak when we're at the peak. But on average, over the 4 years, I think it would be slightly lower than that. And those numbers will continue to change, but that's the report is probably the best reference I have for looking at what the job numbers will look like.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have 3 questions. I'm not sure if you'd like me to
Well,
bring
let's
them
see
all
if
at once.
we have others. Start with your first one.
Start with the first one. Okay, the first one. And thank you very much, Mr. Mikkelsen, for joining us here today. We appreciate it, and I encourage ongoing communication with this council as you have news to share with us. In the throne speech last week, there was mention of environmental assessments, and I'm wondering if you have had opportunity to look at that and to understand if that means there's going to be any changes that could have a positive or negative impact on your assessments moving forward.
Yeah, so I briefly looked at the content of the throne speech, and I think there is a number of policy objectives that have been stated in the throne speech that I think are consistent with what some of the goals of this project are. So I think that's a very positive thing. I don't think there was anything particularly new with respect to the environmental assessment process itself that would impact the project. I think what we would anticipate a very comprehensive environmental assessment process, and as I mentioned, it's both provincial and federal, so there's sort of the two bodies. I think the one thing that is would represent something new potentially for the project is the identification of the Canadian Water Agency. So there's a new agency that's going to be, that has been proposed to be, or new regulatory agency that's been proposed to look at water that would be likely applicable to this project.
Thank you.
Councillor Kentner has a question, then I'll come back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, through your worship, and thank you, John, for coming to us again. I especially appreciate the third aspect of your announcement today, undersea and underground transmission lines. That's a very significant commitment to people in the municipality of Meaford and beyond, for sure. I wonder if you could just give us an update on negotiations with SON, and in particular, whether or not you anticipate that those negotiations will culminate in a vote by the band members in the two communities. Thank you.
Yeah, so as you know, this project lies within the traditional territory of the Saugeen Ojibwa Nation. We acknowledge that, and we recognize their territory. They've indicated that they have a need to be involved in any decision-making related to this project. They have jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction with respect to projects within this area. So we're hopeful that they will eventually see the opportunity that this project presents, both in terms of an environmental solution as well as potentially something that they would enter into. Those discussions are ongoing. There's nothing new I can report here today.
Okay. Back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Your Worship, thank you. And just continuing then, John, if I may, on the discussion about SON, on page 11 of your presentation, the second comment suggests, I'll just read it for those who are listening. The project has initiated early engagement and dialogue with the SON communities and is working towards a meaningful partnership to develop and ultimately jointly own the project. I wonder if you could expand on that for us.
Yes, so the SON have indicated their need to be actively involved in the environmental and the looking at the economic side of this project. They wish to have a decision-making role with respect to their participation in the project. So they are involved with us at the moment in looking at environmental aspects of this project. That work will inform their decision whether or not to support the project, and secondly, if they do support, whether or not they would enter into any kind of partnership with us to jointly own the facility.
Okay. We have Councillor Vickers.
Through your worship, hi John. It's good to see you here in person finally. It's been since last winter, I guess, before we've actually seen you in person. So the question I have has to do with maybe potential revenue for the municipality. And I guess, I know you've told me before that it's still early to get into any kind of discussions about, you know, what they call it, property taxes or compensation to the community. I do have the question I really have is, in the Bruce Nuclear Power Plant, do they pay property taxes over in the Port Elgin area? Or is that kind of tax-free? If you know, do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yes, but to be honest, I do not know for sure what the answer to that question is. I'd take that one back and respond to you once I talk to the Bruce folks.
Okay, if you could, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, your third one, please.
I appreciate your indulgence, Your Worship. Thank you. My third question, John, relates to folks who are living in what's commonly known as the impact zone, and I'm wondering if you intend at some point to host a meeting with those folks who would be living underneath the proposed reservoir, and at what time during the project might it be appropriate to have such a meeting, or maybe you'll have more than one meeting with those residents?
Yes, we would welcome the opportunity to meet with concerned citizens throughout the municipality, but in particular, if there's concerns with respect to people close to the site, we'd welcome the opportunity to meet with them. I think we would see that these discussions could start at any point in time. Now is fine.
No.
Thank you.
Councillor Vickers.
Through Your Worship, I know this might be a hard question to answer, but we seem to be having delay after delay on whether D&D even wants to be a willing host. Do you have any idea, or do you have an inkling whether Holly King is actually going to make a decision here towards the end of September, or whether that commenting period is going to get extended once again?
My understanding is, and I have occasionally I have discussions with the Department of National Defense surrounding the progress of their work. My understanding at this point is that they're not intending to extend the September deadline, and decision is expected by the end of November. Currently, they're expecting to make a decision on whether we're going to be permitted to proceed to the next stage of this process at the end of November.
And the reason why I'm asking it, because even with these delays, it's still costing the municipality a little bit of money, and certainly time on our part, like as councillors and Rob as the CAO. We get all these emails constantly, and it's like, well, what happens if the D&D says no? And I just, it does after a while become a little bit, a lot of reading day after day after day, and I just like to see the process, maybe get a little bit quicker. I know you don't have any part of it, John, but it's a comment that I would like to make anyway, that at one point there back in the spring, we received as a councillor well over 100 emails concerning this project. And I just, you read through them, you try and, you can't answer them all. A lot of them really don't ask questions. They're just telling you their opinions. And after a while, it does become, is it time for somebody to make a decision? So I guess that's not really a question to you. It's more of a comment of my own. So if you don't have to answer it.
Perhaps I'd just like to comment, if I could, our commitment to the community is that you will not be burdened by our project, and to the extent that there are costs that you're accumulating at the moment, at this point in time, or up to this point in time, any reasonable cost we would reimburse the municipality for.
Thank you for that, John. Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, John, for coming today. I know that I specifically asked the community liaison officer to engage the council and have TC Energy come, and I know others around the Horseshoe also extended that please come to council. John, today you've mentioned something for the third time that I want to have some real clarity on. You mentioned very briefly in passing about a host community, and I think you said along the lines like what has been done in other communities. John, the real crux of the matter on this is The municipality of Meaford is a neighbor. We are on the outside of that fence. The real host is the 4th Canadian Division Training Center, that federal property. And in its essence, that has been a real difficulty for the ratepayers who we all read their remarks, that they expect us to make a stand and to make a position known. And if it is promoted from TC Energy to have the municipality of Meaford a host community, it would, by extrapolation, then say that members of council are unanimous in embracing. So I think it's the 3rd time I've heard this, that really we're beside this. We're the ones just outside that fence. We're close, but really our jurisdiction, you mentioned First Nations. First Nations have got more impact on this coming off the water than what we do right there, other when it gets to that environmental statement. So John, I'm just saying that I don't think at this time to move that forward. This councillor's position on it is that I would not wish to have a document put before us that we would be signed up as a willing host community, because quite frankly, we're not the host. So I look forward to your remark on the word hosting the TC Energy project. Thanks.
Is this just a question of nomenclature? So it's a community agreement, not a host community agreement? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, John, you've used, and TC Energy has used it before to be a willing host community. That's the terminology that I have heard. And if that's incorrect, I look forward to be corrected.
Yeah, so my apologies if the terminology has created some issues for you, but we, in our previous work in other communities, we did call them host community agreements, but if it's more preferable, it can be a community agreement.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you again, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Mikkelsen. John, it's another numbers question for you. We keep hearing about this $250 million savings in hydro costs for Ontarians. I guess I can't help but think back to when the Green Energy Act came in and how much that was going to save Ontario hydro ratepayers. It didn't. Hydro rates went up. People in Ontario conserved more. Hydro rates went up even further. McGinty told us there were going to be savings. TC Energy's telling us there's going to be savings. Can you convince me that TC Energy's promise is going to be more credible than McGinty's? Now that may not be difficult, but I'd appreciate hearing TC Energy's reasoning. I know you're talking stored energy, which is somewhat different from wind power and solar power, but it's just I can't help but thinking we're suspicious of these savings coming down. Can you ease my train of thought there?
Yes, so I'll try. There's a couple things. So the estimate that we've provided at $250 million a year in savings is the result of, or the output from a study that we had commissioned on behalf of the project to estimate what this would do for ratepayers. So that is not a promise at this stage. It basically defines for what we believe is the rationale to initiate this process. But before this project goes forward, there will be a comprehensive assessment of this particular subject before, obviously, the province is ultimately going to have to provide the commercial structure to initiate that process. And I would fully expect that either through an OEB hearing or through some process within the independent electricity system operator that the savings will be fully vetted.
Okay. Councillor Kentner?
Through your worship, if I may just ask one last question. John, in the event that DND were to say, unfortunately, this isn't compatible with our training facility, what would TCE's alternative move be at that point?
Well, at this point, we need a site for a project, so that would render that site not appropriate. And at this point, we'd be looking at different projects. The project would be terminated at this point. Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, I have one for you, John. Just to respond to Councillor Bell's comment, I think the understanding here is that this council unanimously agreed that this project was worthy to go into the next stage, which is the environmental assessments to which you have referred. And I think that is our position. There is no other indication or understanding of that this council has unanimously agreed that we need the answers to the environmental issues that have come forward. So from the perspective of whether this is a host community or a community partnership down the road, I'm sure that's where you're thinking positively, as you should be as the leader of this project. And we are very, very conscious that we will reserve judgment on our official position until we have our questions answered with regard to the environmental concerns and that we have put forward. But having said that, we are engaged, we are involved, and I am assured from all levels of government that we will be at the table to discuss any future engagement or any future involvement. So with that explanation, that's my understanding, Councillor Bell. But I have a question for you, John, if I may, and that is, I'm intrigued and recognize the value of your statement that you have designed this project in the public eye. To me, that is a phenomenal response to the questions that you've heard from our public and from our councillors as well, to say that you have completely changed your initial concept of the project based on what you have heard from the community and from folks who have particular concerns and particular ideas about other projects of similar nature. So my question to you is, this must be costly in terms of changing a design plan going forward, and how have you accomplished that, and will you continue on in that vein? I think it's admirable that you are listening and responding to the comments that you get publicly. Certainly, I know you've responded to our councillors' questions in that vein, and we would expect the same going forward. But in terms of designing in the public eye, that's got to be an expensive proposition.
Are you referring to the process itself or what is done to the facility?
Yes, to both, the process itself, but also how you've changed the dynamics of the facility, and is that going to increase the cost of production when it comes down to that, if it does come down to that?
Well, to answer to your first question, yes, it is costly, but I think it's a reality of our times that you need public support for any kind of initiative, particularly initiative of this scale. So I think it's expected that we would be modifying our initial plans to adjust to stakeholder concerns and stakeholder issues. So that, I think that's the answer to your first one. Yes, it has increased the cost over what you might have been able to do in the absence of public input, but we can't imagine not doing it. So that, with respect to the second question, yes, the changes that we made did increase the cost of the facility. I think we had originally stated that it was about $3.3 billion. I think we've added about $1 billion in terms of additional cost to the facility to adjust to, the changes that will, in our view, address, for the most part, yet to be proven, but for the most part, the concerns that have been raised about visibility, noise, and protection of the aquatic and water quality.
Thank you for that. I don't see any further questions for you, John, so I will thank you very much for your presentation and for your forthright answers to the questions, and I'm sure we'll see you again. Within 6 months, I understand, you can come back for another presentation on the same topic.
Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for your good questions today. Appreciate it.
Okay, moving on now to public questions. And I understand we have 3 that Matt will read out for us.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. The first question is from Louise Bucella, and it is as follows. TCE states that this project will not interfere with the operations on the base, and they state that they are concerned about people's safety. In brackets, whose safety? The military, question mark. What is your stand on the safety of the neighbouring constituents who will be put at risk during the 4-year construction period? We will have to deal with noise, core drilling, the escarpment to bury turbines, powerhouses, etc., air pollution, water turbidity, unsafe drinking water in our shore wells. Once this project is completed, there will be a 375-acre reservoir with a 12-metre dammed wall above our neighbourhood. We other residents who own properties on the water have a water view or access to the water who pay the highest taxes for the highest risk in this municipality. The base has thousands of acres of land. Can they not find a safer location for the reservoir, or are other locations unsafe for the military? Will we be compensated via property taxes for the risk that we endure during and after the construction of this project? And further to that question, what is the municipality's malfunction plan if the reservoir or the dam breach?
Okay, thank you for that. I think part of that question is to go to TC Energy itself. Would you say?
As these questions, Madam Mayor, at a council meeting, they're not for TC Energy to respond to. These are questions of council, but I'm sure TC may have comments that they might like to provide to council later in the day or
Yes.
at another time.
Not at this time. Thank you for that question. You have a second one?
The second question is from Joanne Devaney and reads as follows. I live on Captain's Court within the impact zone of TC Energy's proposed project site. I have a 2-part question regarding construction of the pump storage plant. During a tour of my neighbourhood with members of council, it was noted that the reservoir dam will be built directly over my home. I had asked at that time if the reservoir and dam was already built, would the municipality permit a developer to build homes below it? The answer was no. I would like to know how TCE can even propose to build a massive storage dam above our homes, who permits this, and what are the liabilities to the municipality for any property damage, loss of drinking water, or personal harm during and after construction. It has also been rumoured that TCE will build a concrete making plant on the property just south of the entrance gates to the base. Can this council confirm with TCE that this is a possibility? If this is a possibility, can such a facility be built in close proximity to a residential area? And if so, what are the liabilities to the municipality in regards to human health and environmental effects of particulate matter?
Okay, thank you for that question. And the third one?
Excuse me, Your Worship. May I make a comment?
You want to comment on this, on the question?
Yes.
All right.
So her first part of the question about council, would council allow development underneath the reservoir if the reservoir was there first? That's really not up to council. Rob, could you help us with, like there must be bylaws or there must be zoning sort of a thing. So that's not something that I could go out and look at and say, no, I wouldn't do that, because we're kind of restricted by, rules on planning. So Rob, could you maybe help us answer that question?
Yeah, through the worship, so just on the dam situation, we've identified that in our report to council that we're looking for more information on that and impacts on residential. So when they go forward, we look for more information on that. With regard to would we, the municipality, allow development, a lot of those type of risks are mapped through appropriate agencies to deal with. Typically, their environmental protection zones, so their development is prohibited through the designation
and implementation of those provisions. I don't know whether they would apply or not in this particular instance. Probably a floodway zone would be prohibited from development. But yeah, it would have been established prior to, and development would have been prohibited in that regard, if applicable, if it was the other way around.
And I guess my comment is that, as a counselor, I don't think I could go and make that call. I think it was inappropriate for whoever did this to make a judgment call when it really isn't our call. We have planning, a planning department or a planning act. I'm not exactly sure what you'd call it, Rob, but, it's not something that I could just go and say, yep, I don't think it should be, or it should be, sort of thing. So I just like to make that kind of clear that, council doesn't really have the ability to look at something and then say, no, it can't be done.
Councillor Vickers, your point is well taken. These questions are coming to council and they do not have to be answered. If we are not able to answer the question from council, then we will certainly table them, and that will be considered, as have all of the comments and questions that our residents have brought forward on this issue as we go forward, if there is a go forward position. So we do not have to answer these questions, and often don't answer these questions from the public until there's more information to be shared. So just to answer your point about that, and we don't have to feel badly about this. Of course, we would not be expected to have the background information to answer that particular question. So do you have a third question?
I do,
Matt?
Madam Mayor, thank you. The third question is from Yulia Belov, and it states, some of the members of council stated that they favour the proposed pump storage plant because of the jobs that this facility would create for Meaford. Have the council and municipality of Meaford conducted a study to see how the local businesses will be affected by this project? To see how many jobs could be lost in the tourist sector, for instance? Many local businesses posted the say no sign because they think they'll be negatively affected or will lose their jobs. Where can I see the results?
Okay, thank you for that. And I think we will save those questions for further consideration. Okay, moving on to motions and bylaws for a decision.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, council inquiries first, please.
Why do I skip that all the time? Sorry about that, folks. Yes, council inquiries are next. Because I know there is one coming. Councillor Kenter, my apologies.
Thank you, through your worship. This really isn't an inquiry. It's really a kudos to Tori, our Director of Infrastructure Services. Some weeks ago, a ratepayer called me out to his house on the 10th Concession South, which is a road that is shared by Meaford and Owen Sound, the border, and that road sees a lot of very heavy truck traffic. There was a large depression across both lanes in front of the house, and every truck that passed day and night shook it to the foundation. So I had a really nice call from these people on the weekend, and they said the requested repairs were effected on Friday. It was a beautiful job, and they're now getting a full night's rest. So I wanted to pass on kudos to you, Tori, and your team. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I'll pass that on to my staff as well.
Always good to share good news. Anything further, Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And this is probably to Tori. I understand the rocks that we need to shore up our shorelines are getting fewer and far between. Now, over where I live, there is several fields where they're taking out the fence rows now and getting these rocks. Would the municipality ever do that on their own, or would it all be subbed out to other contractors to keep the price down?
Through your worship, so all of the work that we have done to date, the contractor finds their own supply of material and provides it to us through their quote that they provide. So we don't do it ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Just to let you know, there's a ton of rocks out in Sydenham.
You farm rocks out there, do you?
Yes.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a question from Mr. Armstrong. I'm not sure if he would be able to answer it or not, but Rob, our fine municipality, up until a week or so ago, was basically unscathed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, just within about the last week and a half, we've had, I think, 4 recent cases. And I don't know if other people are getting upset about that or concerned about that, but without giving away anything in too much detail, can you give us any idea why all of a sudden at this late date these number of cases are jumping? Is it because what a lot of people are saying is the reason? And I don't want to say that because I don't have any proof of that. But do we have any idea why the numbers are spiking in our municipality? Thank you.
Through your worship, all of that information is not disclosed. It's private information maintained by the health unit. It's not shared with our control group or anything with regard to cases. What effect is unknown to us. It is concerning that the numbers are rising because it increases obviously the risk. And all I would say is this: continue to do what we're supposed to be doing, wearing the masks, washing our hands, and doing social distancing. That's all I can really say in regard to that. I hope it's an isolated incident with a group, but other than that, we can't offer anything more because it's not disclosed to us due to privacy reasons.
Thank you.
Are there any further inquiries? Okay, seeing none then, now we can move on to the consent agenda. Items in this list have been seen by the Committee of the Whole for discussion, and we can now choose to approve pass these items and approve these bylaws with one motion. So there's a number of them today. We have CAO 2020-16, that we approve the following grants under the Downtown Community Improvement Plan, and those grants are listed. B is COR 2020-34 as an award of tender for the residential recycling, organics, and garbage collection, and also to approve the discontinuation of plastic film collection. COR 2020-35 is the 2021 budget framework that we have seen in the past and had a great discussion over. D is COR 2020-36, the Meaford and St. Vincent Community Center and Arena Ice Operations. And I'm going to pull that. I think Darcy has an update for us on that one, so we'll pull that one. Next one is Bylaw 2020-59 to establish an Economic Development Advisory Committee. F, Bylaw 2020-60 to authorize an encroachment agreement for the Chamber of Commerce Big Apple. G is Bylaw 2020-61 to adopt a cost of living adjustment policy. H is Bylaw 2020-62, a consent agreement pertaining to Concession H, Part West, Half Lot 6 in the geographic township of St. Vincent. I is a Bylaw 2020-63 to approve a deeming bylaw, and that's it. Are there any of those that we wish to pull? Councillor Kentner.
Your worship, item G.
G? And Deputy Mayor.
B, please.
Okay, anything further? Seeing nothing further, then I will ask for a mover and a seconder for A, C, E, F, H, and I. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Kentner, Councillor Bell. All in favor? And that is carried. Okay, going back to the first one, the wished pulled was COR 2020-34, an award of tender for residential recycling, organics, and garbage collection. Deputy Mayor, I'm assuming you'll move that to put it on the table? And a seconder for that, Councillor Greenfield? Okay, did you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I did have a question, if I may, Your Worship, and I'm just curious, Darcy, if you have the answer, perhaps you can figure it out for us. In relation to full cost recovery, and I know Council will have to have this discussion during budget time as we look at the cost of bag tags. Do we know at this point, with the increase in this contract, what would full cost recovery be for a bag of garbage? Tori, have you or Darcy done that calculation?
Through your worship, I don't have that number right now, but we can definitely have that discussion during the budget deliberation. I know that with the previous contract, it was understood that about $5 per bag was cost recovery. So it would have to be increased from there to recover the remaining amount, but we can definitely look into that and get a number per bag.
Thank you.
Anything further? Question on that? Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I guess through to Tory. So we're talking about bag tags. The cost of picking up the garbage went up a very small amount. Not as much as the other two. How did we negotiate on the organic waste from 406,000 down to 273? Was there a mistake made by Miller?
Through your worship, so recycling and organics are collected together, and most of the increase in costs are seen due to changes in the recycling program. It seems that they had split the costs between the recycling and organics program, but we asked them to properly reflect the costs in the recycling, as that is where most of the increases were. And our thought was, especially once the recycling is 100% cost recovery by the producers, we won't see as significant of an increase in organics, and it will better reflect what those actual costs are without the recycling component.
Okay, thank you, and if I may. So this doesn't reflect what we're going to get back from the Ontario government for recycling, correct? These figures?
So right now, for this contract, we see normally in the range of 45 to 50% back from the provincial government. So we would anticipate that we will continue to see that. We do see it the following year after we pay for the recycling program. So we don't anticipate that we'll see it covering the costs until 2022.
Okay, thanks. So the 410,000 for Blue Box, you're telling me in 2023 that will disappear?
There's the transitions occurring between 2023 and 2025. So depending on how that transition occurs, we've heard different things. This council identified to AMO that they would prefer to transfer in 2023, but there are many things going into those decisions. We did structure this contract so that it can go between 2023 to 2025, depending on when that transition occurs, so that we can enter into that new contract without recycling once that transition occurs. But it will happen sometime in that time period, and we'll continue to update council as we know more information on that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I'll call the question. All in favor of this report being received? And that is carried. Thank you. And the next one is COR 2020-36, the Meaford and St. Vincent Community Center. And I pulled that. I guess I need a mover and a seconder for that, please. Councillor Greenfield, Deputy Mayor, thank you. And Darcy, I think you have an update for us on that public skating, I believe.
Through your worship, well, I've got a bit of a broader update, just so that everybody's aware. So we've got confirmation from public health that public skating cannot happen. In fact, any kind of one-off rental or pickup kind of shinny hockey cannot occur, probably for, I would say, for this entire season at least. For folks that want to do pickup hockey, they have, if allowed, at our facility, and we're still working through the processes, but they'd have to establish a pickup league. So we can do one-off rentals if it's the same family unit. So myself, my wife, and my 2 kids could go rent the arena, and as long as it's just the 4 of us, we can do the rental. As soon as we try and bring anybody else in on a one-off, it's not permitted by public health. Now, if I go to the facility staff and say, okay, every single week I want to rent the ice at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and it's going to be myself and 4 other families, we can effectively create our internal league and make sure that we sign all the proper protocols, and as long as it's the same roster of people that are under that 50-person capacity, then we can continue to rent the facility on a weekly basis if we want to. So this is how pickup leagues would also work. But I just wanted to give council the heads up that, like, public skating is not going to happen. We cannot do one-off rentals. It's only going to be structured rental agreements that we have where it's every week. We're working through the options right now, trying to see whether we can make something feasible that we could offer every other week. So like if you wanted to do something with, you know, a group of families or whatever, it didn't have to be every single week, but we could do offsetting weeks maybe. But we're trying to work through that. The other thing I wanted to let council know is that, you know, we had spoke with all of our different user groups, and nobody really has given any kind of thumbs up for ice until November. Figure skating said that if ice went in early, they could probably use it, but there was no guarantee that they would need to. So typically what happens is that, you know, if this was a normal year, we would have fired up the plant on October 5th. And then from that point forward, as soon as the slab got cold enough, right straight through until October 13th, we would have been making ice and prepping ice. On Wednesday, October 14th, the ice would have been ready to go for the first night's practice. What we're going to be looking at this year, however, though, is firing up the plant on October 19th with the expectation that by Wednesday, October 28th, the ice is ready to go. Figure skating will be the first group that will come in, so we're going to do very much a soft launch for our major groups. So the first week, it will be figure skating only. The second week, we will then start to transition in the Knights of Meaford and minor hockey, and we'll run like that most likely until the middle of November, and then starting in the middle of November, we'll allow the pickup leagues and these kind of, you know, defined other user groups. As long as they've got plans and they have the rosters and everything else set up, we'll start allowing them to come in the middle of November. So that's the plan that we've got in place right now that we'll be bringing forward to the emergency control group over the next week or two as we refine everything.
Well, thanks for that, Darcy. I appreciate it. Any questions or comments? Councillor Biggers?
Through your worship, the hydro is probably the biggest expense, I guess, besides labor at the arena, I would assume.
Correct.
Are we in a fixed rate or fixed cost contract for the hydro?
We are not. That can only happen for residential users that have an established use. We've tried a number of different ways to make sure that we can stabilize our costs, but we're a large commercial use that's, we just have to pay whatever the spot price is when it's actually used.
So basically it's on a meter. So,
it is on a meter, yes.
because I think at one time it was always rumored that you couldn't start any time before a certain date because the contract was signed, and then you couldn't allow it to go over any amount of time because the contract was at the other end, sort of thing. But that's kind of not the way it is now anyway.
That's certainly not the way it is now. No.
So last year when the ice went out on March 14th, whatever the date was, basically we didn't get charged extra for those 2 weeks we didn't use then.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving this, and that is carried. The last one is bylaw 2020-61 to adopt a cost of living adjustment policy, and Councillor Kentner, you will put that on the table. Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Bartley. And did you wish to speak to it first?
Yes, thank you. Through your worship, I'm just a little confused. The cost of living adjustment policy doesn't seem to match what I understood our plan was, that is to have the average neighbor municipality, first-tier municipalities, like be an average of them. it includes the county, and I just don't understand why. I don't recall that we were including the county in our calculations and maybe I just, slept through that. I'm sorry if I missed it.
Darcy?
The,
Rob?
Yeah, the policy, as we understood it, was Grey County municipalities, and Grey County is a municipality, so that's why we have included that in the report.
As always, this is a proposed policy based on the direction the council gave. If council doesn't want the county grey to be in there, they just need to amend the policy.
Through your worship, it was, Steve, I thought it was your model, which was that each of the neighboring first-tier municipalities, we'd take an average of them, and that's what we would shoot for our increase.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You are correct, Ross, and yet I don't have a problem with the county being in there. I really don't, as part of the averaging out. But what this policy that's in front of you right now throws everything out the window. This policy reverts after October 30th back to CPI, just what we tried to get rid of in the first place, is the way I read this. Is that correct?
To your worship, no, it's not correct. We're using 1% right now because we don't know other municipalities, but at the end of the day, it's the average of those municipalities that have established their cost of living by the point in time that we need to do it. So, no, it's not reverting back to CPI, to your worship.
Thank you, but having said that, I don't really have a problem with the county in there. If you do, bring it forward and we'll vote on it. But
Okay. Any other comments?
So just, through your worship, for clarity, this really could very well end up not being the average of our near neighbors at all. It would be the average of the municipalities that have already set their budgets. I just don't, you have no control whatever here. You're not going to get what you're trying to strive for, Steve, and I just think there needs to be, there's maybe a better way that we can come at it.
Any thoughts on Councillor Bartley?
thank you, Madam Mayor. And being the devil's advocate here, I brought this forward, and at the time I also said that that figure will not be done before Christmas. That figure will be done when the other municipalities come up with their figure. We are the first out of the gate every year, and we're the first one to be done every year, or thereabouts. And until I get the figures from the other municipalities, that figure floats. That's all I was trying to do is be fair and use the average of the rest of the municipalities, which we cannot do until the rest of them have theirs set. So if you want to go back to CPI, go back to CPI, but I don't think that's right.
Madam Mayor, if I could speak to that.
Thank you, Matt. Go ahead, please.
There's a date in there because there has to be a
October
number at some
31st.
point. If we wait until all municipalities have done their cost of living increase, then we could be in April before we get as far as passing a budget, which is problematic, as council well knows. But my large point, and it's a point that I've repeated a lot over the last couple of years, is if you don't like this policy, do not pass this policy. Because if you're going to pass a policy and then in 3 weeks' time go against that policy by saying, yeah, we don't like that number, we're going to wait till December, then don't have the policy in the first place, because policy is there to guide what council and what staff do. If you are not going to abide by it, it's not worth having.
Councillor Vickers?
Through your worship, so Matt, is this policy logistically possible?
As
Putting
written,
it forward.
yes, it's logistically possible. The date of October 30th was deliberately chosen because council will be meeting in the first week of November, and that is becoming our standard practice to consider the budget and spend 2 days deliberating on that budget. So if we do it on October 30th, then we can get a number in there for those 2 days. If it's any later than that, when council spends 2 days deliberating the budget, you won't know what the actual tax increase would likely be.
So to further that, so that's my point, is this policy logically possible? logistically possible.
If council if council adopts and then abides by this policy, yes.
Does that mean if, let's say, South Bruce, by, just picking a name, doesn't get their budget out until the 1st of April, are we bound to wait until that community or that municipality?
No, this policy would only take into account, as it's written currently, and council can change this, as it's written currently, this policy would only take into account those municipalities in Grey County who have announced their rate by October 30th of each year.
Do you foresee any municipality announcing their rate by October 30th?
Through your worship, I see probably half of the lower tier municipalities I would be able to get a proposed rate. It won't be their final rate, because again, final rates don't occur until the budgets get finalized. So if everybody else was tracking at the same timeline as Meaford, budgets would be finalized the middle of December, which means that we would have to wait until a January meeting to even get all of the final numbers. Now, we usually are within the first 3 municipalities in the county to actually have a finalized budget. And I will continue to ensure that that happens as much as humanly possible. If anybody's every one of you around the council, Shu, have private sector experience. Tell me any private sector business in any sector of work that doesn't know what their budget is for the following year come January 1st. And we should follow by those same rules just because we're public sector. We already know what our fixed costs are. Why we would be waiting, I do not know, because it only slows down the process. It forces us to write a whole bunch of reports to council to seek pre-budget approval on everything capital and anything that is more than 10% over last year's budget. So it just completely stalls the wheels of us moving forward, which is why it is imperative that we continue to move forward with understanding our budget by December. So we may have some municipalities that provide us data based on this policy, but it'll be dependent on who's at what position what year as to what municipality we would get by October 30th. And they will only be their draft rates. They can change them as well.
I'm going to question this method of calculation and see if I'm reading it correctly, because it says the annual COLA increase shall be calculated by taking an average of the COLA rates in Grey County, upper and lower tier municipalities that have been announced by October 30th of the previous calendar year. That means it'll be 2019, correct?
Yeah, to your worship, no, it's the COLA that will be applicable in 2021, announced in 2020.
In 2020.
So that's when it speaks to the previous year, it's that. And in addition, I would just add, to your worship, that a lot of municipalities on a CAO call that I was on have a target already, and when we get to the budget process, we'll be sharing those target numbers that those municipalities already have as targets for the purpose of budgeting.
Okay. Sounds like a fair enough way to do it to me. Any other questions, comments? Then I will call the question. All in favor of this bylaw to adopt a cost of living adjustment policy? 1, 2, 3, and that is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7.2, items for consideration. The first one is CAO 2020-20 and a bylaw that will go along with it, the County of Grey Transportation Agreement. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Bartley. Over to you, Rob.
Thank you, Worship. So as you're aware, the county has implemented, I think it started last week, a county transit system applicable to the municipality of Meaford that's running from Owen Sound to the Blue Mountains. There is 4 stops within the municipality of Meaford, one of which is being conducted on municipality of Meaford land. being Woodford Hall. The County of Grey is entering into agreements with those municipalities and those partners for those stops. So what you have before you is the agreement for the use of Woodford Hall. With regard to the actual agreement, it includes indemnification for the municipality with regard to the use. It includes us being named as additional insured on the county policy. It also notes that the maintenance of the property, our responsibility for that will be just based on our normal maintenance requirements. We don't have to increase any maintenance responsibilities on the property. In particular, snow clearing really early in the morning for a early stop. So it's just part of our normal operations with regard to that. So we're in a position to recommend the execution of the agreement with Grey County for the operation of the stop at Woodford Hall.
Thank you, Rob. Questions for Rob? Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Rob or perhaps Darcy, as I understand that, our municipality is going to be responsible for the basically cleaning the lot as far as providing public parking spaces, and this will be primarily in the wintertime, of course. Do we have any idea how much that will cost us? And I'm thinking that's entirely our expense as opposed to the county's.
Through Your Worship, I can speak to that.
Please.
As I noted, we currently clean the lot, and we will continue to clean the lot as we do. We don't have to increase our service to provide for the bus stop, so there's no increased level of service that we need to provide for that on what we currently do.
Okay, thanks.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a comment on Saturday, I happened to be at Rexall just as the bus was coming up for the last stop of the day there, and I had a look inside the bus. It's beautiful, and certainly the exterior really captures people's attention. And I talked to the bus driver, and she told me she'd had one passenger all day. So I think it's up to all of us to really talk up this transportation plan that the county is implementing, and she assured me that she was doing the same, and we just need to make sure that we help build awareness as much as we can here locally in the same way that the county is, to help people know what the routes are and what the times are and where they can get the bus and how to use the bus. So just wanted to share that. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I will call a question. All in favor of this bylaw, and that is carried. COM 2020-23 and a corresponding bylaw 2020-65 is a ITFD union agreement. I have a mover and a seconder. Please to put that on the table. Councillor Bartley and Councillor Greenfield. And Matt or
Yes.
Rob? Yeah.
I will take this one, Madam Mayor, as I've been part of the bargaining unit for the ITFD union agreement that's before you today. This is really a bit of a housekeeping item. ITFD firefighters have been unionised for a number of years, and their union agreement ended in June of this year. As the municipality of Meaford continues to be part owner of that municipality at the present, of that fire department at the present time, we have to approve the collective agreement as presented. I believe this is a 3-year term. It was a very pleasantly negotiated agreement. It's been approved by the firefighters, and it was approved by the ITFD board itself last week, I believe.
Thank you for that, Matt. Comments? Councillor Greenfield.
I do have a question, Your Worship, if I may, through you to Mr. Smith. On the bottom of page 19 of the ITFD report, it says concerning the payments to the fire personnel, the practice is $53.91. Is that an hour, or is that for the duration of the practice? Do we know?
No. So the way it's traditionally been done at ITFD, which is different to some other fire departments, including Meaford, is that they are paid $53 for the weekly practice, whether that be 45 minutes long or 3 hours long, they receive that amount of money. There are some changes in the collective agreement to deal with some of the inequities that come out of that for additional practices. So rather than a whole day practice on a Saturday being classed as $54, it's now classed as the number of hours paid at what they call the second hour rate, which is a little bit less than your initial call out rate.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, all in favor of this bylaw, and that is carried. DEV 2020-46 is a heritage permit application for a new dwelling on Collingwood Street. And I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Kentner and the Deputy Mayor, thank you. Rob?
Thank you, Worship. And this one, actually, Councillor Kentner spoke to this one in his update from the Heritage Committee, where the Heritage Committee supported the construction of a new dwelling on the Collingwood Street property that we approved demolition early this year. So this is the permit recommended for approval with no conditions as recommended by the committee.
Yeah, thank you for that. Anything further? Questions? All in favor of receiving this? That is carried. Thank you. Moving into Committee of the Whole, mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Bell, Councillor Greenfield. And all in favor? That is carried. First one out is Community Services, COM 2020-24, Museum Strategic Plan. I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley, thank you. Matt, this is Community Services.
It sure is. Delighted to be able to present the final draft of the Museum Strategic Plan for the next 4 years. This is the culmination of a process that started in November of last year and has involved pretty extensive public consultation, which thankfully we managed to achieve just before the COVID situations hit, so we could do lots of that in person. The plan's being developed to really give a forward momentum to the Meaford Museum, to structure its exhibits, collections, to help us decide on programs, and so on and so forth. Inside the draft strategic plan, there are action items split across 5 categories, and they are capital and building, administration and customer service, collections and exhibits, finance and staffing, partnerships and programs. It's a total of 20 action items across those categories, which we believe are achievable over the next 4 years. I should point out that the text of the plan that you have in front of you is the text, and by the time this gets adopted by Council in 3 weeks' time, there will be nice, pretty pictures there as well. Our wonderful communications team will design this up into a nice booklet that we can have available at the museum and elsewhere and online. Happy to take any questions, and Susan is, I believe, here to help. Or I maybe didn't tell her that she was about to be on, so she's not, but I should be able to answer everything.
Passing the buck, right? Any questions? Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Inside the report, it did mention about the materials which are stored at the museum and the threat of high water, and where would museum staff and volunteers at this time be able to store some of these artifacts that could be well threatened by high water? Do we have a location, or is that something that's going to have to be looked into in the future?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Through you, Madam Mayor. There is an issue with high water at the museum. We make no bones about that fact. There is continuously a steady stream of water coming into the basement and being pumped back out again. That is purely caused by the height of water on Georgian Bay right now. We have already moved everything that was in that basement out of the basement. The major issue there is that the furnace and HVAC systems are based down there, so we still have to be very conscious of it. But everything that was stored in terms of artifacts and collections is now in the attic or on display. There are a number of problems with the attic as well in terms of access and space and humidity levels and so on. So one of the action items in this plan is to really have a good think about what other options there are for storage of things to make sure that they last as long as possible. We've got some amazing exhibits in the museum, and some of them well over 100 years old. We need to do that in such a way that we don't lose them because we're not taking care of them properly. So we'll be looking at that during the course of the next few years.
Thanks for that, Matt. Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think everyone around the table realizes that I'm as big an advocate for the Meaford Museum as anyone, but I'm also an advocate for trying to keep our tax increase down. So I'm just wondering if, when we get a little further into our budget talk, if we should look at maybe having the museum open only 2 days a week on off-peak season and 3 days a week on peak season days. I don't like to suggest that, but again, we need to look at some cost-saving efficiencies. Now, not having the museum open doesn't necessarily mean there wouldn't be anybody working there, because according to the report, there's a lot of homework basically to be done there. But I'm just wondering maybe if it might soften the blow a little bit as far as the museum budget is concerned. Something to think about.
For you, Madam Mayor, thank you, Councillor Greenfield. This report has very much been based on the direction that Council gave back in May, which was to hold the line on the museum budget. If you recall, that report presented 3 options. One was to hold the line but reduce services. The second was to expand the budget, including a second full-time member of staff, and improve services. And the third was to become a seasonal museum in effect. So we've very much written the plan with that in mind. There'll certainly be no budget requests this year, or hopefully within the years to follow on the operational side of things. We have already reduced opening hours down to 3 days a week. That was partly as a test as we came back from the COVID closure, but it's certainly our expectation that we will remain at that in the near future during off-peak seasons, where they're currently open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Because we've made a very conscious choice based on the public feedback that opening on Saturdays year-round is a high priority. That was the number one thing that we were told during our feedback process. So I don't think that reducing the hours any further than that would actually be of benefit to the budget, because unless we were going to go to a seasonal museum and have no full-time staff, we would still need to have the staff to be able to open their doors 2 days a week, all year round, and do all of the many other things that need to be done as are explained in the strategic plan.
Councillor Kentner, and then Deputy Mayor.
Through your worship, this really is a strategic plan to hold a finger in the dike as long as we can. It's really unfortunate, and you know, the choices that we really had the last time we discussed this were to either close the doors or shutter them anyway, or just put the finger in the dike, because there is no budget to really grow or develop this. The one thing I think is sad, and you know, it's not a perfect world, but in a perfect world, we might be able to take the resources of the museum and the library and pool them and make it one organization where you could share staff and do a lot of things, but that I don't think is possible in the public sphere. So I just, I feel I'm looking to the next term of council and hoping that we get to that point, and we're still holding the water back, and then I hope if things improve, we can really start to move forward with the museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd agree with Councillor Kentner that is really the design of this plan, at least on a public-facing point of view. I think it's got the scope to do actually an awful lot of very good work that's very necessary behind the scenes. We have not dedicated the time to our collections, to managing and preserving our artifacts, and to developing the partnerships that we need in order to be a progressive and developing museum over the last number of years. And some of that sort of finger in the dike from a public point of view will free up time for the museum staff and for myself and Susan to dedicate time to some of those activities. And I truly believe that means in 4 years' time, with the next term of council, that will mean that we have lots of options then, and depending on what council would like to do at the time, we'll be in a much better position to grow. Because I'll be very honest, right now, even if council were to throw more money at me, we'd struggle to grow and develop because we need to do the basic work first.
Thank you for that, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the commentary on your comments, Councillor Kentner. So, Mr. Smith, and again, we have an absolutely amazing museum, and I just want to comment on the volunteers connected with that facility and how much work they have accomplished and how dedicated they are. But thinking of this plan and the limited days that the museum will be open going forward, and I know there perhaps might be some cost to this, but maybe not a lot. I'm wondering about the potential of adding some virtual visits, thinking of what the hall has done here with Meaford Live, and recognizing that the museum, will have many days when it's closed, and if some videos could be posted, perhaps that would raise awareness of the terrific displays that are in the facility, and maybe encourage people to come out to the museum more so when things find a new normal.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think that there are lots of possibilities along in the electronic world. There are costs associated with that, and staff have to have the capabilities of doing it as well, because obviously we're not necessarily experts in that field. One of the action items in here under the administration and the customer service heading is develop a communication strategy to promote the Meaford Museum, its exhibits, events and programs to a wider audience. And I think a key part of that communication strategy is how do we get knowledge of the museum and what we have there out to people, and online activities could very well be part of that communication strategy.
Thank you.
Okay, good questions. Thank you, everyone. Seeing no further, I will ask the question, are we willing to adopt the Meaford Museum Strategic Plan? And that is carried. Next one is COM 2020-25, is ranked ballots. And I have a mover and a seconder to put this on the table, please. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Vickers. Okay, this sounds like a clerk question.
It sure is a clerk one. A very different topic to the last, but it is me again. And something I'm also delighted to be able to present to you, because this is the sort of thing that makes clerks really happy. We're geeks at heart, and these sorts of options for elections are always interesting. Back in 2016, the province amended the Municipal Elections Act. And part of the amendment there was to allow municipalities to switch to something called ranked choice ballots. And in the simplest possible terms, that means that instead of going into the ballot box and ticking one person for the mayoral seat, you would number your preferences in order of preference. So your top choice would be number 1, your second choice would be number 2, your third choice would be number 3, and so on. There are a number of reasons why this can potentially be a good thing, and most of them are around that idea of proportional representation and making sure that every vote counts. If you are a person who has a great passion for a particular candidate, and you know that candidate is probably not going to win the election, we could perhaps talk about the federal election in Grey County if we wanted to along those lines. But if you know that your candidate has a very, very low chance of election, you're probably still going to vote for them because you're really committed to that. But your vote then isn't being considered as part of the top choices. With a ranked choice ballot, if your preferred candidate is eliminated early because they have the least votes, your vote is then counted again for your second preference. And if that candidate is eliminated, your third preference is counted. There are some mathematical formulas associated with this that I've talked about a little bit in the report, but I won't even attempt to bore you all with now. But the idea is that it means that every vote counts. And there's an interesting knock-on as to that, in that because when candidates are out campaigning, they want first place votes, obviously, but they also want second place votes. If you're out campaigning and you meet somebody that says, no, Joe's my man, I'm going to vote for Joe, nobody else, under ranked choice ballots you can say, okay, vote for Joe, but vote for me second. And then that person might be of value to you in the electoral process. The idea behind that is that it reduces some of that negative campaigning. So there's much less likely to be personal insults thrown during election campaigns or personal criticisms. And that is a very positive thing for the electorate. People don't like seeing that. People don't like pitched battles between candidates. So ranked choice tends to eliminate some of that. We didn't really bring this forward to council back in 2016 because it was very, very new and nobody had done much about it. In fact, the City of London was the only one of 444 municipalities in the province of Ontario that chose to use ranked ballots in 2018. There were a couple of other municipalities, the City of Kingston being one, who chose to add a question to the ballot in 2018, simply asking, would you like to use ranked choice voting in 2022? They then took the results of that ballot and used that to make their decision for the next municipal election. There are a handful more municipalities who are doing ranked choice voting in 2022. You may have seen some media coverage last week about the City of Toronto. They had planned to do so, but the city clerk has now said that due to the COVID implications, particularly on the enormous scale that they operate under, that they won't be able to amend that in time for 2022. But the City of Toronto, the City of Kingston, the City of Cambridge, all of which are heading towards ranked choice ballots. So we felt that it was a good opportunity to come to council and see whether you had any interest in finding out more or looking ahead. And there's three options presented. One of them is to stay exactly as we are now, to continue with the current voting system called first past the post. The second is our recommended one, which is that we go out and ask the public. We add a question to the ballot for 2022 to ask our electorate if they'd like to use ranked choice voting in 2026. The third is that council could decide that you wish to use ranked choice voting immediately, and we could start that in 2022. All of which are on the table and all of which are equally good, but I had to pick one, so I picked asking the electorate what they'd like to do. And I'll happily take questions.
Councillor Bell.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and thanks, Matt, for just bringing this to our attention and for our consideration. I went back through the last two campaigns, and probably my fellow councillors did the same thing. And so, to use two examples that work out very easily, Madam Mayor, yourself, and Deputy Mayor, in the last election, my calculations, Madam Mayor, is that you got 49% of the vote straight out of the gate. And even if the third person who was running, all of their votes said that the next choice would have been the second person, Madam Mayor, you still would have been elected. For you, Madam Deputy Mayor, you won quite handily over your opponent. And so, of course, the ranking of that was they simply chose to have Madam Keaveney the Deputy Mayor. Where it does become confusing mathematically would be down through having 5 councillors. And I think that we went through something with our electorate going to electronic voting. That was something that the elderly, some got along fairly well. My mother told me that she got along okay. There were others who did not get along okay. A question that I thought may have been brought, but it's not for discussion, is whether we'd go back to a paper ballot. But on this one here, I think with the size of our municipality, the complexity that I read through this, Mr. Smith, with the math that would be involved on second and third choices and fourth choices down the line for basic council position, this councillor is in favor of staying the status quo and just using still first past the post. So that's my thoughts on it, Madam Mayor, and I hope I didn't embarrass you, but the stats are out there, Madam Mayor, how you were elected.
If I could leap in, Mayor Clumpus, I think it's a really good point that Councillor Bell's made. In the city of Toronto, in the city of London at the last election, they calculated that without ranked choice, I think there would have been something like 80% of their races would have had the same result as they had previously under first past the post. And absolutely, this is a much more complicated system for multi-member constituencies like electing our 5 councillors. I have done this before on a smaller scale, and so it is totally possible. And being who I am as an elections nerd, I would enjoy doing it, but it is more complicated, and a communications exercise would absolutely have to take place to explain to people what the plan was. To Councillor Bell's other comment, I will just trail what's coming up at the October meeting. There will be a report on October the 19th talking about the different methods of voting that we could use in 2022 so that Council can decide what they wish to move forward with.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Bartley, and then Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I tend to agree with Councillor Bell. There's probably not everybody in this room understands the way the other one works, and you haven't got a hope in Hades of explaining it to 90% of the people on the street. And I think it'd be a waste of time. This is my own opinion, a waste of time trying to get that. You'd have to have a huge document sent out to everybody to try to educate them. And I just think we should stay the way it is. That's only my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Greenfield, you ready?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This one, I don't know, maybe we should defer a decision on this one because there's all kinds of discussion to go with it, for sure. It's been mentioned that we're still struggling in this municipality to get away from the sit-down ballot, the paper ballot, and you know, there's some arguments in favor of that. I guess I have a couple of questions, or one question anyway for Matt. If indeed the ranked choice voting came in, could you still vote for only one person? Do you have to vote for A, B, and C, or can you still just vote for one?
Yes, you could. Normally what would happen, and I didn't get into this in too much detail in the report, normally what would happen is that we'd establish a number of choices. So for the mayoral election, you might do your first, second, and third preference. For a councillor, you might go down to your 8th preference or something because you've got 9. But if you only have one preference, then you just have one preference. And then if that particular candidate will be eliminated because they had too few votes, then your vote would just be set aside and it would be what they call it an exhausted ballot.
And if I may, Your Worship, I'm wondering if this may do away somewhat with the polarization that we have in this municipality. Because without naming any areas, a number of people in one particular area tend to vote for candidate A because he or she is from my area, my community, my backyard. Maybe not because A, B, or C are the best candidate, but it's just, hey, they're my neighbor. If you had a chance to still vote for them, number one, but gee, there's somebody over there in the other environs of the municipality that I kind of like and kind of makes sense. Maybe I'd put them down as number 2. So there may be a bit of an advantage there to get a better representation. But
That's,
as I say, I don't know if we're just quite ready for this and all that.
That's certainly one of the logic behind it. This sort of system's used in most European countries at the national level. There's relatively few democracies that use first past the post. Then they really are the English-speaking ones. The states excluded, and their rather strange electoral college. But so it is the general idea that it's to try and deal with some of the negative and some of the polarization. But it's a big step. And as I say, I don't mind on this one, but it's an interesting question for council to answer.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kempner?
Thank you, through your worship. The things that I dislike about it are that it would severely slow down the results. You might not even get council results the evening of the vote.
It would likely be the Tuesday.
Terribly complicated ballot, and that could conceivably lead to errors in counting the ballots. And I don't trust the computers to do it, and I don't think most people are mathematically skilled enough to do all the calculations here, and they're so complex that in the end, I think this is a grave danger of miscounting them. So I think we need to, first of all, get back to a simple, non-electric way of dealing with the results, and I don't see an advantage at the municipal level in the ranked system. Sorry. Thank you.
Just to comment on the counting aspect, Madam Mayor, I also am not a fan of the tabulators, those machines that you slide your ballots into. I've done manual counts at elections for 25 years now, and I've always been very successful doing that because you take your time, you can deal with the oddities that you always find on ballot papers when they are physically on paper. I don't believe that there will be any higher chance of mistakes. I believe that you would structure it in such a way that I or the clerk at the time would have a very clear understanding of what we were doing, and we would train staff very well, and it would be methodical. You would take a lot more time to do it, and that certainly happened in the City of London. They did, all of theirs were single-member constituencies. They only did first preferences on the Monday night and came back and did the races where second and third preferences came into account on the Tuesday. I think that's likely to be something we start to see more and more of over the years. You'll have heard lots of comment about that for the American election, that the presidential election, that you probably won't have a definitive result on the evening of the poll. And personally, as not a candidate, I don't particularly see an issue with that. I've done local council elections for many, many years, as I say, though not necessarily in Ontario. And on occasions, the votes would happen on a Thursday and counting wouldn't happen until a Sunday. And that was just how it was.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just thinking back to our last election and recognizing the challenges that we had as it was with the electronic voting and the time it's taken for many of our residents to kind of adjust to that style of voting, and then thinking of, changing the system again. I'm just worried about the impact that might have on the numbers of people who choose to vote. And I just think it's important that everybody, does vote and that they understand how they're voting. And I am concerned about, even providing the education that you would to our residents. I'm just worried that it would still be complicated for many people. And I think we've got a system now that people understand and that they are familiar with and that we are all familiar with. And it's, it would be an interesting question to pose, but my personal preference would be leave things the way they are.
And I think that's exactly why I suggested the question on the ballot rather than a move to ranked choice voting, because I think it is something that the public may struggle with immediately. I'd encourage councillors, you're thinking about this, to divorce this from the voting method conversation, because you almost have the opportunity to think about the voting method based upon what type of voting you're doing. Like, if you chose ranked choice ballots, you might choose paper voting instead of internet, or if you chose to keep it the way it is, you might decide that a different type of voting was the way forward. And as I've said, we'll discuss that in October. I think it is complicated, but it's complicated on the back end. I do think that everybody can understand the concept of, this is my first preference, this is my second preference, this is my third preference. Not everybody needs to know exactly how that counting happens. They need to understand that it's done correctly and it's truthful and it's the correct result, but I wouldn't ever expect everybody to know, how we calculated 20 plus 1% minus the quorum of this and plus the addition of that. No.
Councillor Vickers?
Yeah, through your worship, like Matt just said, we aren't being asked whether we want to change it. We're just asked if we want the question to be asked. And, and I'm all for letting people make up their own mind. I don't know whether everybody wants to vote in a different way. At least put a poll out there and ask them which way they might prefer and let it go from there. It's not binding. Like, I don't think we have anything, there's nothing to lose, only to gain an understanding of how many people would like to change. So it is a confusing way of doing it until you've done it a few times. So until you start talking a bit about it, you'll never get to the finish line. So the finish line could be 10 years down the road, but if you don't start talking about it and asking people and having the people start to ask questions about it, you'll never get there to change. So, I support putting it out there and asking the question.
Thanks, Paul.
One quick clarification there. A question on the ballot can be binding. If more than 50% of the electorate vote in what's in effect a referendum, then that is binding on the next council.
So what happens if I may, what happens if it goes the other way? That 50% of the people don't say yes, and council still decides to change?
So, sorry, let me rephrase. If 50% of the electorate vote in total, then the result, whatever the result is, becomes binding. So if 50% vote, and of that 50%, the majority want to move, then you must move. If the majority want to stay with what we've got, then you must stay with what you've got.
Yep.
If only 40% of the electorate vote, then it's just advisory to the next council, and there's no required action.
What was the number last year, or last time?
Margaret, do you remember? Around 53-ish?
So Matt, my question would be, what kind of education would you have to provide even to have the question on the ballot?
So,
what does that look like, and how was it counted, and that sort of thing?
So a question on the ballot's actually really, really easy, because it's a straight yes or no question. So you would go in, you'd make your vote in the same way as you do for everything else, and just tick the yes box or the no box, and so it's counting that is pretty easy. In terms of communication of what that meant, we would develop a communication strategy for explaining what ranked choice voting is, but then members of the community will be completely able to register as what's called a third-party advertiser to campaign for or against that.
Okay. Councillor Greenfield.
Thanks again, Your Worship. I think actually Matt has left council in pretty good shape on this recommendation, because all he's asking is to submit a question to the electors regarding the use of ranked choice voting in 26. So we're not deciding this today. It's a long way down the road. So all we're doing is putting it out there to the public, and I don't have a problem with doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Anything further? So there is a recommendation coming forward here. Would somebody like to make a motion to accept or reject one of these three options?
So the submit a question to the electors is on the table right now. If members of council want to not change anything, then somebody would need to amend the motion with the text that's in the report that says that the motion be amended by replacing the existing text with that Committee of the Whole received report COM 2020-25 ranked choice voting for information purposes.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. So that is the recommendation. Is there an amendment, or are we ready to call the question on that recommendation? Councillor Kentner.
I'm just not sure, you spoke rather quickly there, Mr. Clerk, so I'm just, are you saying you would entertain an amendment which said that we would not put it on the ballot in the next election?
So the motion that is currently on the table is my recommendation,
Yes.
which is that we submit a question to
Question.
the
Like,
electors.
we can defeat that if we wish to.
You could defeat that, but then it just sort of dies, and it's as if this never happened. What I would normally prefer, so that you know you've made a conscious choice, is if you don't want that, move an amendment to change the motion to be whatever it is you want it to be.
So I would be prepared to move an amendment to not put it on the ballot in the next election. And if I may, I'll speak to that when you give me the opportunity.
An amendment, so in the report that is,
So it would be option one instead
Option
of
one.
option two. So the
Option
amendment
one.
would be to just receive the report for information purposes.
yeah. And is there a seconder for that? Councillor Bell? Any discussion on that amendment? Councillor Kentner?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I could just speak to that, I just feel that there's enough going on, complicating our lives, and it will be necessary to give the electorate a great deal of information in advance of the 2022 election, so that they can vote with any kind of confidence, or vote with any confidence whether they wish to adopt this system going forward. So I just think there's, more important fish to fry. Thank you.
Okay. Anything further on the amendment? The amendment is to continue on with the current voting system. Any further? Then I will call the question on the amendment alone to continue with current voting system. All those in favor? 2, 3. Those against? 2, 3, 4. All right, so now we're back to the recommendation as presented, to present the question to the electors regarding the use of ranked choice. Any further discussion necessary on that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of receiving and approving this recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4, and that is carried. Okay, moving on to COM 2020-26 is a community safety and well-being plan, our timeline update, which we know must happen. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Greenfield and Deputy Mayor, thank you. Again, Matt.
Yes,
You're on the
I promised to
docket
talk for
tonight.
less time on this one. We've talked a number of times during the course of the year about the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan and how we intend to do public consultation. We obviously had a survey out in the early part of the year and had intended to do a really, really aggressive public consultation exercise in April, May and June. We obviously weren't able to do that and rescheduled a lot of it for October. And Hannah, since in recent weeks, has been reaching out to a lot of the groups that we intended to meet with. And a lot of the feedback that we've got has been, yeah, we can meet, but we'd still really prefer not to. And I think in light of the ongoing situation and certainly the numbers that we've seen announced today for yesterday's testing, we believe that we will be better to postpone that public consultation until the spring. That would mean that, in effect, our community safety and wellbeing planning would go on a bit of a hiatus for a couple of months. And then we come back in the spring and hopefully be able to deal with getting out, meeting those groups, or if not, have designed good, solid virtual activities or mail activities and so on. I think we're pretty clear that this will be our last postponement because we do need to get this going. Council might remember that the deadline for having one of these plans was January of 2021. That deadline has been waived and a new one hasn't been announced, but most people in the province are working on the basis that it'll be January 2022. This proposed plan won't change anything in terms of budget. We will include the public consultation exercise in Hannah's day job when she returns to that, and so there'll be no additional funding requested. Just the money that hasn't been spent from this year's budget will be popped into a reserve and pulled back out next year to allow us to do the communications activities that we need to do associated with that consultation.
Thank you, Matt. I just want to comment as well that Hannah has done a remarkable job on pulling what we do have together. And I just wanted to acknowledge that, working pretty much on her own under Matt's guidance, who's been extremely involved in all the other things that the clerk's job has to do. So with 453 responses to the survey, there is a lot of data that has been received to date, and some interesting comments that we can begin to formulate some opinions going forward. So thank you, Hannah and Matt, for moving this along. Any further questions here? Okay, seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor of this recommendation? And those against? That is carried. Moving on to corporate services, COR 2020-37, the municipality of Meaford comments for the town of Blue Mountains leisure activities plan. I have a mover and a seconder, please, for that. Deputy Mayor and Councillor Kenner, thank you. Rob, Matt. Darcy.
Yes, Your Worship.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Can't see you down there.
This is just an information report just to ensure that, as staff, we're not providing comments directly to Town of the Blue Mountains. They're going through a leisure activities master plan, or as we call it here in Meaford, a recreation and culture master plan. Different words, same meaning. As part of that, they're reaching out to all their stakeholders, and the consultant was asked to confer with every municipality that bordered Town of the Blue Mountains to get our comments. So staff, we met with the consultant, looked at what they were trying to do, and then met internally to develop some kind of overarching themes and comments that we think that they should be looking at. Certainly these will coincide with things that we'll want our consultant to look at when we do our next update of our master plan. So we just wanted to bring this forward to council, make sure that you're aware of it, get any comments that you have prior to sending this off to Town of Blue Mountains, so that council is aware of the municipality's comments and that this isn't just a staff-led thing.
Thank you for that. Darcy, comments or questions? Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Darcy, no way, shape, or form does this put us on the line for going in with the plan that they come up with.
Through Your Worship, there is no requirement to partner on anything. We simply want to, from at least our perspective internally, we want to make sure that they look at partnerships so that we're each not having to build the same infrastructure and run at less than nominal capacity.
Correct. So we are not on the hook for anything here. This is just for information purposes.
Just for information purposes only. I mean, in their plan, much like most of our plans, we're going to be looking out, pretty definite at 10 years with 25-year horizons. So, we expect that they look at things based on population trends, demographics, and desires of the communities and kind of the region as a whole, and what would be expected, so that we make sure that we're planning things better as a group instead of just trying to go through it individually.
Thank you.
Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you again, Your Worship. Through you to Darcy. First of all, I want to say, reading through this, I couldn't help but thinking about something that Councillor Kentner has mentioned 2 or 3 times about maybe regional or county government, a bigger government, due primarily to costs. And I think there are innuendos in this report that suggest maybe that might happen. But Darcy, we're planning on putting a lot of expenses into our Meaford and St. Vincent Community Center, the arena part, next year. Is there any, should we be thinking about, is that a good long-term investment? Is this the time to make that long-term investment? Do we have to do that now, and are we going to get the payback for that investment in the arena? If indeed we might be looking within the next 10 years at regional recreation.
Through your worship, that's a heck of a good question that I don't have the answer for.
You always have an answer.
I think that hopefully, I can always have an answer, just half the time it'll be wrong, but I think that hopefully with TBM doing their plan and with us doing an update to ours in the near future, you know, and I know that Grey Highlands is thinking about it, Owen Sound has just gone through something, Collingwood's going to be going through the process. We need to look at these things on a regional perspective because of those long-term cost implications. I think for us it's vitally important that the $183,000 that council allocated through the budget framework report to do the analysis on our facility, that's money well spent. Because it's either money well spent to get us to a point where, you know, we're design ready, so we're construction ready, so we know what we have to do for that building, or it's $200,000 that's invested so we know what we're up against, and then maybe we don't go any further than that because there is a regional opportunity. And then that way we haven't wasted, you know, $5 or $10 million in investment into a facility that maybe doesn't have the long-term teeth that it needs. So I think that at this stage of the game, we need to get through our facility analysis, they need to get through their plan, and then we'll have more and better information come this time next year.
Thank you, Darcy. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think this is incredibly timely and important, recognizing the challenges that are ahead of us with our budgeting process this year. We know we're going to have hard decisions to make, and I think it's important that we look long-term with both of these plans and recognizing the growth that's coming to our area and knowing that a lot of these people base their decisions on what is available recreationally. So I'm glad to see this happening, and I think through all of this process we can also consider other potential partners who may want to work with us as well between the two regions coming together. Perhaps there are other organizations or partners out there that would want to come in and support. So I'm looking forward to both the report from the town of Blue Mountains and to our own new plan once that's completed. So thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and this is an interesting report. It can be looked upon as being kind of exciting. It also can be looked upon as quite possibly being depressing, because if you are a very wealthy municipality, you may well be able to afford doing some of these newer amenities in the future. And I mean, I could see that in the report it was mentioned, what's going to happen here in Meaford? We can lose the pool, we could lose an arena, we could lose a community center, we could lose a curling rink. We could be having our residents in this long-tooth view living here and doing things someplace else. Now, does that happen now? Yeah, it does. People go over to the Julie MacArthur Recreational Center. They use that, and they live here. At the same time, there is some pretty hard statistics about, can you afford to just simply go out and build a brand new arena? Our counterparts in Chatsworth are looking at trying to do an arena. They looked to the province for some financial help, and they were declined. So the ground is still sitting with no arena. So all of these things are important, and it's something that for the future will be a real struggle, that people have pride in their community, they do. They like to say, I contributed to making that, or building that, or being involved in that. And from our municipal aspect, we could be asking people to play hockey in Owen Sound or over in Thornbury. We could lose that. It could happen. So I found the report to be very interesting, a lot in it. And like I said, you could look at it as being inspirational, and you could also get a little bit depressed. So there's going to be a heck of a balancing act to be achieved over the next few years. So just some comments. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Anything further?
Madam Mayor? Sorry, if I
Sorry,
could.
I can't see you.
Yes, I'd just like to comment on that. I think, you know, I understand, you know, where Councillor Bell's coming from, but I think that I'd rather look at it from a glass half full perspective. I mean, we looked at the pool. We actually had a pool company come in last year, just internally, to replace Blue Dolphin Pool as is, the way it is right now, allowing it to operate, give or take, for probably a maximum of 12 to 14 weeks, even if we extended the season. It's $2.2 million to replace what we got. So is that possible for 12 to 14 week operation? Clearly, multi-use rec facilities that have arenas and pool complexes, you know, something like the Julie MacArthur, or maybe even smaller to a certain degree, you're really looking at a population need of at least 20,000 people. Neither Meaford nor Thornbury individually will probably ever get to that. So combined might be the only option. And to the point of, you know, we may be sending people to Thornbury to play hockey. That very well might be the case, but, you know, long-term, maybe our arena could very easily can be converted into a curling center, because we don't have to worry so much about the same AODA compliance for dressing rooms, and everybody comes to our community to curl. Or we use the arena, because it still has a great superstructure long-term, as an indoor soccer complex, and everybody regionally comes to our community to play soccer. I think that was the approach that we took from both Parks and Facilities and Development Services side of things, is that we need to look at this regionally so that we're not overbuilding infrastructure, so that we don't end up, I mean, we have what are now single-tier individual municipalities that are trying to operate 4 arenas within one community effectively. And we don't want to get to that place where we've so overloaded on infrastructure to try and be everything to everyone and not be able to afford to do anything. I think that's really the underlying message here.
Thank you, Darcy. Comments?
Just if I may, words of wisdom, and it makes me wonder, you know, if we shouldn't just put that $183,000 in the bank then, and take a little pause before we, because if the writing is on the wall to that extent, you know, we need to rationalize some of our thinking about, you know.
Through your worship, it's a good comment. The issue that I think I clearly see even from, you know, talking with counterparts in town of the Blue Mountains, is that they're not close to a multi-use rec complex. This is trying to look at, even for them, you know, 10 to 15 years in horizon for something like that, because their arena has got at least 15 years of useful life left as well, right? And if, especially if the province is still going to continue to mandate AODA compliance, which, COVID or not, I don't think they're going to back away from. I mean, everybody should have equal access and equal use to facilities, especially municipally owned facilities. So we have to meet a deadline by 2025 for AODA compliance. So I think we have to move forward with this engineering and consulting assignment to really understand where there are pitfalls within our existing facility, and if we can mitigate them or get around them, and what the cost of doing that's going to be. And you know, to Councillor Kentner's point, it might simply mean that we know that, you know, long-term this may not be our forever place for an arena within this community, because we might be considering something else. So instead of spending $5 to $8 million to completely renovate it, can we just spend $1 million or $2 to make sure that we can use it well for the next 10 years and then do something different? And I think that hopefully this process will get us through that.
Thank you, Darcy. Okay, we ready to call the question? All those in favor of receiving this recommendation? Those against? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, moving into updates from our members. We'll begin with County Council. Over to you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. County Council met virtually at the call of Warden McQueen on September the 24th. It began with considerable discussion about the start time of our meetings. Currently, we begin at 9:30, and the motion was on the floor to change that to a 10 a.m. start. And there was much consideration, and after a recorded vote, it was decided to move the time from 9:30 until 10 to support folks who have a distance to travel and those who may have agricultural activities to attend to before the meeting. The Blue Mountains Community Church from Thornbury made a presentation to County Council. They were requesting a setback exemption for a renovation they wish to undertake at the front corner of their building, which is in Thornbury, just on the curve into Clarksburg near the Anglican Church. And this brought a lot of questions about sightlines because the building is already encroaching on the permissible setback. So staff will bring an additional report back to County Council with recommendations. Councillor Weber from the town of Blue Mountains brought a motion forward requesting that the changing demographic of Grey County be considered in the county's upcoming growth management study. Town of Blue Mountains in particular is feeling the impact of part-time residents now becoming full-time ones as a result of COVID, people working from home and wanting to getting away from larger centers, and this does have an impact on infrastructure. The county has partnered with a group of Masters in Planning students from University of Toronto. This study will look at downtowns across lower tiers of Grey County. Stakeholder interviews will occur and recommendations will be presented to County Council on topics such as increased CIP initiatives, and the students will consider the impacts of COVID, the movement to online shopping, barriers to development, heritage components, downtown short-term rentals, empty storefronts, and high rents along main streets. And there's an opportunity here to encourage people to live in our downtowns, and for one, I'm really looking forward to this project and any suggestions and recommendations that might come back to Meaford to support us in our movement towards adding growth to our own main street and getting our empty businesses filled. Settlement has been made through reconciliation efforts between Grey County and Son. Son has been awarded 275 acres of forest in Georgian Bluffs, and this is good news. This has been ongoing now for a very, very long time, and Grey County is really the first to settle with Son, and there are other concerns with provincial and other municipalities. So it's really great to know that Grey County has been aggressive on this and that they have reached an agreement with Son. And that was it, Your Worship, unless you wanted to add anything.
Well done. That's full comprehensive for sure. And our community policing, Councillor Bell, as chair of that advisory committee.
Yeah. Thanks, Madam Mayor. It had been some time since the advisory committee had met for a variety of reasons. We met last week, and it was joined by yourself, Madam Mayor. Appreciate you taking some time and coming out and sitting in. There was no inspector to join us, but we had two very seasoned sergeants who came over, and I had asked the sergeants to just change up a little bit. I know, Council, you have seen in the past reports come from the OPP inspector, and they talk about what accident occurred on what road and what animal was hit on what concession, and it asked them to really zone in on the important, what we consider to be the important, always talked about conversations that the residents have, and they were very much obliged to do that. They went through some key issues, and the first one, of course, they talked about was the issue of speeding. It's something that the sergeants could not answer, what is going on in society, why there is this press for the need for speed. and it's all over in all areas, and we're not, you know, special that we see things happening. It is just prevalent. They have no answer for that. Also, conversations came out about the in-school liaison officer from the OPP. And we've had 2 previous inspectors who, as gentlemen of their word, have said in times past, safety is important to us, and you're going to see an officer in a school. These sergeants were very clear on the fact that our contract, we do not pay to have that activity occur in our municipality. That being said and understood, they also said that if there's a case where teachers in a school wish to have police presence to do a conversation, that is part of their community service and they can do that. But there's a neighboring municipality who pays to have an officer attend their school, and we don't do that, or other municipalities don't. And that has to do with that contract that we have. The other one was COVID. There's been a very marked increase, calls for service, domestic disturbances, and family members against family members, neighbors against neighbors, and the stats rose significantly. And they simply said they've been locked up, they're held tight, they may have lost a job, all of the social dynamics have been hard, and they're seeing it on. The police have to show up on a domestic service. People who write in questions to the Police Advisory Committee, it was discussed, our clerk was there. We have moved that if people send in questions rather than waiting for a member of the advisory committee, all of the questions that the general population have will be forwarded on. And if there's something that is absolutely definitively known, that the staff will make sure that these things are, first of all, they're received, they're taken in, and when it is absolutely possible to do so, we'll get back to those individuals with the answer that they have. So that was important to talk about. So we're waiting for a new inspector to be out there at the Chatsworth Detachment, and we've had one new person join our group, which was nice to see, to keep that group active. And I don't know, just maybe on some of the comments of my fellow councillors have got any questions, Madam Mayor, maybe I can give an answer.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, if I may, so just, you did mention it, Councillor Bell, but just to confirm, because many residents are approaching us about this speeding issue, and it is certainly a problem. And my comment to them on the advice of Mr. Smith, if I may say, is to have a letter written. So those letters come to your committee and they are read at your committee, and then they are passed along to the OPP for their awareness that this is a concern to our residents.
Well, Deputy Mayor, the questions and comments that residents have are addressed immediately. We don't wait for the next cycle of a meeting to answer questions. In this case, because we hadn't met for some time, time did lapse. But I know that if you have a comment on that to support, those questions are received, and if they can be dealt with immediately, we will. And hopefully, Mr. Clerk, you back me up on that.
Absolutely, Councillor Bell. The Community Policing Advisory Committee gets a correspondence list in the same way the council does. So they're provided with those letters and can talk about the ones that they feel that they should be talking about. If we get requests through that email address, which is policing@meaford.ca, for anybody who'd like to send an email, they come straight through to me. If there is directly answerable questions in there, then I will deal with that. Or if they are a specific complaint about an issue, then either I refer that to the OPP or refer the resident to the OPP, because obviously as a committee or as a municipality we can't do anything about individually named incidents. But if they're about speeding in a particular location, then we have developed in partnership with the OPP a process for dealing with speeding complaints. And in essence, that is as staff, we have an ongoing list of locations where we've had those complaints. We send out the speed spy cameras at a future point in time, take some measurements for a week or so, and then we'll assess that information, but more importantly, we then send that data to the OPP. They will then look at that and assess whether or not it meets their criteria for enforcement. We cannot tell them to go and enforce at a location, but if they believe that there is a speeding problem based on the data that we've provided, then they will create what's called, and I'll get this wrong now because I haven't thought about it for a few days, they will basically create an occurrence that has a specific terminology that means that their officer will go there and will stay there for a number of hours. Whereas if they're just patrolling and doing speed checks, then as soon as anything else happens, then they go off to that other incident. So they'll go, they'll assess for a couple of hours and do some enforcement there. But they'll only do that if the data justifies it in their eyes. And they will not and cannot tell us what the average speed has to be in order to make it a justifiable enforcement, or what the max speed is, or how many cars a day. That is private to the OPP, and we can't direct them any differently.
Thank you for that, Matt and Councillor Bell, for your report, and that's a good segue into the next one, which is our community.
Tori has her hand up there, Your Worship.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see
That's
anything
okay.
back there.
Through your worship, I just wanted to add to what Matt just identified. So we are also working to get a page up on our website, the municipal website, where residents can go and actually put all of the required information for those speeding concerns. And it will identify exactly what information is helpful for us to proceed with the process. So we are hoping to get that up in the next couple of weeks. We have been working on it for a while, but through communication with the OPP and internally, it takes a bit more time right now with everything going on. So we are working towards that, and so we'll allow residents to have a location on our website to more easily input that information.
Thanks, Tori. So, as I said, good segue into the Community Safety and Wellbeing Advisory Committee. Tony, appreciate your comments. We did have a chance to meet our new acting inspector, Paul, and his last name is escaping me, but he did come to our meeting last time. We did meet last week. And what I think is important to stress at this is that our existing committee members of this advisory committee, even though there's been a delay and we haven't met in quite some time since January, that the committee members are very satisfied with the direction that has been proposed going forward through Hannah's work, and are happy with this single community focus of the community and well-being strategy to build the plan. We had one member of our Youth Roots representative, as well as the Minister of Health, who also sits on the joint Bruce Gray committee, and he commented on the fact that it was pretty difficult to really stay involved and connected with the size of the group, with the Bruce Gray group, which is numbering about 69 people at a committee meeting. So you can imagine what that is like. So our very, very small, close-knit group are still working hard and bringing forward their thoughts and concerns to this committee. And your comment about from the policing, the cost of COVID-19 on family issues, family problems, people being kept inside, stuck inside, and the emotional toll that is taken certainly was reiterated through our committee as well. It is a concern. Mental health for everyone, including our youth, is a concern going forward, and all of this is very, very valuable information to building our community health and wellness plan to go forward. So it's all integrated and all contributes to the whole. So I thank you for that. Anything else from anyone? Councillor Greenfield.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. We did have a Meaford Public Library meeting, and I guess the big news from there is that the opening date for the new Meaford Public Library is now been set at October 26th. That's a Monday, and that's, as of right now, the final. And the current library will be closed for a week prior to the opening due to the moving, but certainly Kathy Lee, Lynn Fascinato, and all the other hardworking individuals at the library are just immensely excited and looking forward so much to getting into that new building, and it's going to be a really good news project for our entire municipality.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield. And moving on to our memos, we have the 2021 council meeting schedule. It's good to see a year at a glance. We know it's going to disappear as quickly as this year did, but it is very helpful, I think, to have a council calendar in front of us when we're trying to plan other meetings and holidays. My goodness, what's that? And the next memo is the building report, and I'm sure Councillor Greenfield might have something to contribute on that.
Oh, yes, thank you for asking, Your Worship. I appreciate that. Obviously, August was a bit of a slowdown from June and July, but still from some very respectable numbers. We're very close to the number of permits that were let by this time last year, which is somewhat surprising because what is there that's very close to what happened last year? I don't think anything. We're at 25.5 million, a little behind now from 2019, but still a very respectable showing for this year. We've still got 4 months to go, and some more big numbers to come in. So it's a report we can be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Could I have a motion to move and a seconder to move out of Committee of the Whole? Councillor Bell. Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I saw a movement there. Thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. And we're on to motions. And are there any notices of motions coming forward, Councillor Pickard?
Yes,
Sorry.
I'd like to bring my notice of motion. After last month's meet, or not last month, last week or 2 weeks ago meeting, we've seen a considerable increase in our collection of garbage, recycling, and organics. And where we only received one bid, I think it's time that we maybe start looking to explore different opportunities that we could maybe make our garbage contract a little bit wider. It's not sustainable, in my opinion, to keep exporting our garbage outside of the county or even our country. I think it used to go over to the States, and I think as of late it's gone down to is going down to the Sarnia area. So if you start taking what our carbon footprint on our garbage, when you all of a sudden you start tracking it even down to Sarnia, isn't that great of a it is a great deal of carbon being used. We also have facilities within our municipality, not in our municipality, but within our county. The biodigester in Chatsworth is one. We have other municipalities with garbage dumps. One probably has too many dumps that they're trying to keep maintained. And if anybody that has much to do with this, and if I'm saying anything out of turn, please correct me. But that garbage gets covered up every day. So if you put a small amount of garbage in, you cover it up, your dump becomes full of basically dirt with very little garbage in it. And if you can maximize your dumps out by adding more garbage and less dirt to cover up every night, you'd make better use of what facilities you have, because we all know how hard it is to get an approval for a new garbage dump. And since just kind of going through this, and since we're only a small municipality, we really can't effectively do this on our own. And Matt informed me when we were talking about this notice of motion, was that how other municipalities, if you get into a regional municipality, actually it's the region that looks after it. I think the region of Peel would be one, that it's not the actual municipalities, it's the region that looks after the garbage disposal. And I think, you know, this is an opportunity that Grey County, as a county, could take the lead on this situation. So with this, I'm requesting that we basically ask the county to start investigating on maybe taking over the responsibility of garbage collection and disposal of garbage. You know, it's just almost like the same as the fire departments. If you don't have boundaries, there's, you know, the truck has to go down the road and all of a sudden turn around and head back up the road because it, you know, it's outside, you know, it butts another municipality. If you have it as a county, technically the route should become more efficient and have a little bit more of a flow. So I think these are some of the reasons. These are some of the reasons why I brought this notice of motion forward, and we're looking basically to circulate to other lower tier municipalities in the County of Grey to request their support for the resolution, and basically to make it into an upper tier, not a lower tier responsibility. So not only our staff could talk to their counterparts, I'm hoping maybe our mayor and deputy mayor at the county council table could start you know, talking a bit about it. I guess it was brought up a few years ago and it was defeated. But I think this is a proposal that would add good value, I think, to everybody. We could only be winners out of this if it went to a county-wide proposal. So anyway, those are my reasons, and this is why I'm looking for support for the notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Kentner, and I'm sorry, there was a little bit of a miscommunication here, but I'm assuming that you will move this to put it on the table.
Oh, yeah, I thought you wanted
Okay.
me to speak to it.
I thought you were going to present another notice of motion, so a little bit of confusion there. That's okay, we'll deal with your motion now and ask for a seconder for this motion. Councillor Bell, thank you. And then we'll come back and deal with the notices of motion after we finished with this one.
Sorry about that, Your Worship.
That's okay, my fault,
I didn't
I
understand.
wasn't clear. Councillor Kentner?
So, through your worship, just a question, why has Grey County dragged its feet on this, or has it, or was there a vote over the last number of years to not accept this challenge, or I'm just curious about the background?
And I can't answer that question. I really don't know what the background is on that Grey County. But I'm wondering whether, in light of this recommendation or this motion coming forward, if it wouldn't be a place to start with our neighbors around us to see if we can gather some support before we take it to to Grey County itself. I think that's probably the wisest move to go. If we've got some support from our neighboring municipalities and our colleagues on county council, it would be a stronger position to present to Grey County.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely, and that's what that Matt explained to me. That would be the process, that you'd have to get more your local not local, but your neighboring municipalities to work with you. But
Yeah.
you know, it'll be a long, hard old slog. Like, you know, if you don't start talking about it in the county, you'll never get there. So anyway, I stated my reasons why I thought it should come forward.
I appreciate you bringing that forward. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship, and I was just going to add, as I recall the discussion at County Council when we were looking forward to our strategic planning day in October, that the discussion about waste management was suggested to be a topic of discussion for that day. So I think your motion is very timely, Councillor Vickers, and it will be good to have this to address when we have that discussion. I believe it's October the 8th.
Councillor Bartley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And is garbage fall under you, Tori? So could you tell me, our contract is up, and I think we're the first ones to have our contract up, and we got hit first. In talking to the other municipalities, are some of them coming next year? Do you know that?
Through your worship, the municipalities we talked to had a variety of end dates. However, one date that I guess maybe it is timely as well is when people transition away from the recycling to producer responsibility. Contracts will have to be changed at that point. Some contracts have termination clauses, so they have longer contracts, but have abilities to get out of them. Some contracts will be ending in that time period, and most likely Grey County municipalities will see that transition all at the same time. So it could be a good time to make a transition to the county level if it's seen as something that people agree to proceeding with.
I can fully support what Council Vickers is bringing it forward, but I thought if there were several municipalities with their contract ending next year and they get hit in the face like we did, that they would also jump on this. So I would hope some of the contracts end next year, and we're not the only municipality in Grey County that get hit in the face with this.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. Are there any other comments? So the vote will be on the recommendations put forward here, the motions for decision. The motion be circulated to other lower tier municipalities prior to taking it to, hopefully, the strategic planning for County of Grey. Anything further? Then I will call a question. All in favor of this motion going forward, and that is carried. And now we'll go back to, does anyone have a notice of motion to bring forward at this time? And Councillor Kentner, you were first, and then.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a notice of motion that I hope that my fellow councillors will see some merit in. I plan to introduce a motion to have official ribbon-cutting ceremonies for significant roadworks and bridges. Investing in infrastructure is one of Council's 5 areas of strategic focus. Roads and bridges are core assets that critically support each of our other strategic priorities. The ribbon cutting organized by cyclists and walkers on Frogs Hollow Side Road last week demonstrates that ratepayers support our priorities and take pride in our infrastructure projects. And I feel that failing to have a ribbon cutting for the new Sykes Street Bridge last year was really a missed opportunity. With its new sidewalk overlooking the Inner Harbor, there's even more reason to celebrate the reopening of the Trowbridge Street Bridge. As a council, we're being very diligent to remediate infrastructure throughout the entire municipality, but I do feel we're missing opportunities to bring our urban and rural residents together to celebrate the depth and breadth of Meaford and the importance of each road and bridge to those who rely on it for municipal services and commerce. Thank you.
Okay, we'll see that next
Yes.
council meeting. And Councillor Greenfield, do you have a
Thank you, Your
motion?
Worship. I don't have the notice of motion penned, like Councillor Kentner, but it will be a motion to call for equality and recognition for all peoples in our municipality, regardless of their individual preferences or challenges. And this is inspired by Deputy Mayor Keaveney's anti-racist motion coming forward in a few minutes, and I'm hoping this will just carry our municipality's commitments in line with the community of safety and well-being that one step further. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a possibility to add that as an addendum to Deputy Mayor's, had you thought of that?
I would gently suggest perhaps not, Madam Mayor, because I think the subject matters would have to be...
A little different?
They're a little different, and we'd have to do a lot of fancy dancing on the spot to get some text that would work.
Okay.
It may not be quite as lengthy as the Deputy Mayor's.
Okay, thank you for that. And then that brings us now to the Deputy Mayor's motion coming forward on anti-racism, and I'm assuming that you will put that on the table for discussion.
I would be delighted, Your Worship.
Thank you. And could I have a seconder, please, Councillor Bell? So, over to you if you wish to speak to it.
I do, Your Worship, and thank you for the opportunity. And I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to Mr. Smith and his staff for this motion. Certainly I brought the ideas forward, but I know a lot of research and time was put into the language in this motion, and I'm grateful for that, and I'm very proud to bring this forward today. I won't read it all because, as has been mentioned, it is lengthy, and I do thank Councillor Greenfield for his addition, which I know will really make this a well-rounded discussion. And I just want to suggest that, you know, Meaford is often considered to be a leader, and I believe that we can be again through hopefully adopting this motion today. And I'm going to use strong language here and say I want Meaford to become more welcoming and more inclusive and a more diverse community. We already are, but I think that we can do more. We have all noticed that we are attracting many new residents, and they're coming from all cultural backgrounds. And we need these folks to help increase our tax base, to buy houses, to join our workforce, and to open small businesses. And just on a personal note, in my own place of business, and I've been there, as many of you know, for well over 30 years, closer to 40, and I've employed many people with skin colors of black, brown, yellow, and I have Indigenous folks, and I have people from the LGBTQ, I always get that wrong, community, and I've witnessed on many occasions these wonderful people being the subject of comments from customers that are not appropriate. And I've seen these people brought to tears on occasion, and it's just so upsetting. And I just want to see Meaford get behind a movement to again be more welcoming and more inclusive of everyone. I believe it's critical that we work together to recognize the importance of anti-racism and anti-oppression locally, provincially, federally, internationally, and so on. And I look forward to the report that staff will bring back to us in hopes that we can find ways to become more educated and to go forward and just think through the lens of anti-racism in everything that we do as a council. So those are my comments in relation to the motion, and I just hope that it can be supported today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any comments, questions? Seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor of the recommendation as presented, and that is carried as well.
Thank you.
Moving on to adoption of the minutes, council meeting September 14th, 2020. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner. Any comments or errors or omissions on that? Councillor Vickers.
There is an error in the time.
In the time?
It said it started at 3 o'clock, where it started at 1.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. We'll fix that.
All right. Anything else? Then all in favor of these minutes as presented, and that is carried. Anything on the communication file that folks would like to pull through? No, seeing none. We will move on to a confirming bylaw, and I have a mover and a seconder, please, to confirm that proceedings of the Council of the Municipality of Meaford at its regular and special meetings held in the months of August and September 2020 are taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Vickers, thank you. All in favor? And that is carried. And that brings us to the end of our agenda, and with so doing, I will declare this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for attending and for your participation. And we're done.
And it's not even 4 o'clock.
Amazing, you did well.